Man, he must be so bored.
Her performance is what really stuck out with me when I first watched it.
Yeah, I know if I was 13-year-old, I'd be peeing my pants, so.
Welcome to Backseat Directing,
where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew
and Arron.
And we post new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
Today we're talking about the movie True Grit.
3, 2, 1, action. We're going to get all of it together at one point.
We'll figure out this intro. We changed it, and we added a new episode every Monday and Thursday, and that's been messing us up. We were into a flow for a long time. All right, Andrew, we watched a movie that you haven't seen before. I've seen it when it came out in theaters.
You watched it twice this week.
I did. And that movie is True Grit. It's a remake on a classic Western from 1969.
The modern one came out in 2010.
Correct. And this is one of the movies I recommend for you to watch. I watched this in the theaters with my dad. Overall, what'd you think?
So yeah, first I'm going to say we're doing a recommendation series. So like this is the first chain in it is we're going to pass movies back and forth that the other hasn't seen. So I had never seen True Grit and Arron recommended it to me. My initial thoughts are that I enjoyed the movie. You can tell that it's made by very passionate filmmakers. You can tell that the incredible professionals are involved everywhere from the cast to direction, cinematography. It's very well put together, but then again, I can say that I'm not generally the biggest fan of Westerns. Most recently, I watched a modern Western called Hell or High Water. That's probably the most recent Western I've seen that I really like. I really like Django Unchained, but in general, I'm not the biggest fan, I guess, of the Western aesthetic or the time period because I feel like things can move kind of slow. Back to the Future 3 is another good one I can think of. That one's entertaining. That has science fiction elements transposed into it. But yeah, True Grit is really good. It's an entertaining movie with incredible acting, super impressive work by Hailee Steinfeld, impressive direction by the Coen brothers. But at times I definitely did feel like it was slow and lacking in some action or maybe some ease of understanding. But I feel like they kind of sacrificed some of that for maybe realism.
Was it slow in the sense of like, oh, this is kind of boring and losing my attention? Or was it slow as if like, oh, like they could have put a little more action here, but it still moved forward good?
There were times where I definitely felt myself thinking or looking at the time or at the end of the movie with it only being an hour and 50 minutes total runtime. I felt like it felt longer than that. Mm-hmm. So I think it needed something injected into it. Maybe the dialogue's actually pretty snappy when you watch it. Yeah. It can be hard to follow or understand because of the gruffness of it, which is again, that realism factor. But the dialogue's really snappy and fun to listen to. It's just very dialogue heavy.
It is.
And less like of the action. The action scenes really pop because of that, duality of the calmness of many of the moments, which again, the realism factor of like being in those settlement times where, like I said when we were watching the movie, like, man, he must be so bored just sitting there. Like he's sitting in the back of that, he said Chinese grocery, like, what is there to do? So that some of that realism of there is just empty moments where you have to fill it by talking. Like you notice, I thought Cogburn was a really interesting character. And before I talk too much about it, I will get into who is the cast and crew. But Cogburn even has those moments where they're going through, walking they're on their horseback, and he's just chatting. Like he doesn't seem like he's the type of person to just run his mouth, but the time period is there's nothing to do but talk. So he's just rattling off about his ex-wife to Maddie Ross, just talking.
Probably a little drunk as well.
Yeah, that too. That probably helped, as he is in like a steady state throughout the movie.
Yeah, so like most of our movie reviews, there's going to be spoilers in this episode, yes. So stay clear if you haven't seen it or if you want to see it without having any parts spoiled for you. But I'm going to go ahead and dive into a quick little movie summary to kind of recap the movie. So Maddie Ross is a well-educated, headstrong 14-year-old who is looking to avenge the murder of her father. She hires U.S. Marshal Rooster Cogburn, a tough, trigger-happy, whiskey-drinking man with grit. True Grit to assist her in bringing in her father's killer, Tom Chaney. Against Coburn's wishes, Maddie joins him on this quest. Along the way, they link up with Texas Ranger LaBeef, who wants Tom Chaney for a murder in Texas. So
that was good. They should have had you do the recap for the movie, for the trailer.
That was good. Yeah. I thought the True Grit was a nice touch. You know,
Absolutely.
I was writing it and I was like, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna pause and look at the camera right there.
Dramatic. Yeah, so let's get into, with no further ado, if you don't have anything else, we'll get into who's in front of him behind the camera.
Yeah, let's hit the ratings real quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we got, again, came out in 2010. It's rated PG-13, hour and 50 minutes long. IMDb has it rated at a 7.6 out of 10. 7.6 out of 10.
A 1. This is the lowest score I've ever heard.
Clean off my glasses here. Sorry.
A 7.6.
That 7 looked like a 1.
Feels low for a movie with this much critical acclaim, but my honest personal opinion would be like a 7 to 7.5. So it rings true for me personally, but I'm surprised to see it that low.
Yeah, I would agree with the 7.6. I probably would have had it at like a 7.5. And again, like, it's kind of, we talked about this in one of our other podcast episodes where like ratings need to be towards the genre more so than movies as a whole. You know, like I think it's a really good movie, but overall it's like a 7.5. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like it's not fair putting this up against comedies or superhero movies or, you know, like it's its own thing.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And I think that this movie like is in that drama category, but touches on the comedy like in a surprising way I didn't expect to, because I laughed a ton during this movie. I know like when you kind of got sucked in and came and sat down with me, like we were both laughing at a bunch of parts in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the tomato meter rating kind of shows the difference between the score of the movie but how people can still enjoy the movie even if it's not like a 10 out of 10. So the tomato rating for the critics is a 95%.
Oh my goodness.
And then an 85% of the audience. And again, the tomato meter is like percentages of good reviews.
Yeah.
So 95% of the critics really like this movie.
But they overall enjoyed it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
You know, so it just goes to show that you can get a lot of enjoyment and entertainment out of a 7.5 movie.
And I completely agree with that because, like I said, I feel like this movie to me is like a 7 out of 10. And what I wanted to do with this concept of you and me trading movies back and forth is see something I had never seen before. Mm-hmm. So I just enjoyed the fact of seeing a movie I had never seen, you know, like checking it off my list, getting my movie education out of the way. Got to work on that every week.
Right, for sure. The budget for this movie was $38 million, and the box office brought in $252.3 million.
Which is a huge success.
Yeah.
Incredible
definitely.
Success.
And it had a stellar cast to bring in all of these audience members. Andrew, who do we got in this movie?
Okay, so I think the biggest, most important thing to mention for this movie is the directors. The directors are a sibling duo, which we've seen a couple times in Hollywood. In this instance, it's Ethan and Joel Coen. If you don't know their names, I'm sure you've seen or heard of their movies. They've directed Burn After Reading, No Country for Old Men, Big Lebowski, Fargo, Raising Arizona, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And they're writers for all of these movies as well. They're very, very talented screenwriters, script writers, and they do great story work. So all the ones I just mentioned, and then they've also done the writing for Suburbicon, which is another Matt Damon movie, and Bridge of Spies. So they're very well accomplished, incredibly respected in the industry. I mean, movies like No Country for Old Men and Big Lebowski, Fargo are all-time greats, and their writing talent is really almost second to none. I put them up there with Quentin Tarantino. Like I said, the dialogue in this movie is really incredible, and it carries a lot of weight for the film. So cinematography is done by one of the greatest of all time as well, Roger Deakins, who we just enjoyed talking about in our Prisoners episode. So Deakins has done a ton of incredible movies, over 50 years of experience in the industry, and his cinematography work makes this movie beautiful. There's particularly one shot at the end where he shows them galloping across kind of like a sunset or sunrise as Cogburn's trying to save Maddie's life. We already mentioned spoilers, so I'm safe. And I thought that was just beautiful, breathtaking, one of the best shots in the whole movie. Very talented, Roger Deakins, obviously. And then the executive producer actually I noticed at the end of this movie that I didn't have in my notes until I finished the movie, was Steven Spielberg, executive producer this movie.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. So always good to see his touch. And then our cast, Jeff Bridges as Rooster/Reuben Cogburn. He's the kind of rogue bounty hunter, lawman. He's incredible in this film. Hailee Steinfeld at 13 playing Maddie Ross, incredible. And then you got Matt Damon as LaBeef, Josh Brolin as Tom Chaney, Barry Pepper as Lucky Ned Pepper, so they have it's the same last name as his character. Dakin Matthews as Colonel Stonehill, Paul Ray as Emmett Quincy, and then Domhnall Gleeson as Moon, which I had to look up to see who Moon was because sometimes it's hard to follow the dialogue. But Moon is the young kid who gets his fingers chopped off in the cabin.
Yeah,
and
I thought it sounded just like him, but this movie did a good job of like disguising all of their actors.
Yeah. Oh,
like,
Josh Brolin incredibly well disguised.
I only recognized Gleason just from his voice.
Yeah, and I didn't recognize him at all. When I looked at the picture, I was like, "Is that really him?"
Yeah.
And we like Domhnall Gleeson. I like him from Ex Machina, and I know you've been watching the what's the show called, with the therapist with Steve Carell and Domhnall Gleeson.
I got you.
But this cast is, like you said, they're all
the patient.
Yeah. This cast, they're all completely disguised, which we talk about loving about this movie. I think wardrobe is one of the strongest departments in this movie. Costuming is so incredible, and then the makeup work as well. They all look dirty, except I think that Hailee Steinfeld a lot of times is the only one who's not really dirty, which is kind of reflective of her like innocence, and maybe she has like a little bit more of a proper background because her family seems to have some money.
She doesn't look perfect though.
Yeah,
like, her hair is a little messy. You can tell she's sweaty and all that.
She's
stuff.
of the time still, and still accurate, while also maintaining the character element of her hair is always braided to show that she's like refined and she's not a mess, and she has cleaner teeth, and her makeup
sophisticated.
Yeah, she's sophisticated for the time.
Yeah.
The movie is very heavily bit like on accuracy, and the time period is very much felt, whether it's everything from the dialect to the dialogue, speech patterns. We talked about how during the movie they don't really use contractions. You'll notice they say are not or is not. They don't contract their words because of the time period is, I believe, why the script went that direction. And it's just all goes to adding to the feeling of realism in the movie.
Isn't it funny how they talk in a more like fancy way almost, but at the same time they're like slurring their words and you can hardly understand what they're saying.
Yeah, the enunciation is not there.
Right. But the word pattern is like way more elaborate than how we talk today.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Hailee Steinfeld where she said that she had to go through the script and make sure she knew what everything meant, because of the time period and because of the
especially being like
nature of the dialogue. Yeah, and she said, "Well, I don't talk like that. I wish I did." But yeah, people don't really talk like that anymore. There's a great line in National Treasure where she says to Nick Cage, "People don't really talk like anymore," and he says they should.
Right.
It's just kind of a bygone era that's nice to visit.
Yeah, it's crazy. So her performance is what really stuck out with me when I first watched it, because I was the same age as her, and like there is no way I could do nearly as good as her. Like she got nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
Incredible.
Which at 13, like that's crazy. But yeah, her performance is what really stuck out to me throughout the whole movie. Like you said, she's very well put together, and she's a counterpart to these very well-known, established actors, and she fit right in. At any given moment, you believe that she belonged there and was holding her own. So her performance is what really made me remember this movie. And another reason, or actually I want to see who stuck out to you the most.
So Jeff Bridges stuck out to me the most, which I think the fact that Hailee Steinfeld held her own against a veteran actor like Jeff Bridges is a huge credit to her. But I'll talk about Jeff Bridges in a moment. While we're still talking about Hailee Steinfeld, I want to say that it's very kind of odd to me that she went up when she was Oscar nominated, she went up for Best Actress in a Supporting Role, which is incredibly impressive. She was up against, people who have tons of years of experience in the industry, much older, established actors, Melissa Leo from The Fighter, Amy Adams in The Fighter, Helena Bonham Carter in King's Speech, and Jackie Weaver in Animal Kingdom is who she went up against. So actors and their kind of agents and things like that will choose what role to campaign for. I think it's strange that she was in supporting role, because I feel like she leads this movie as a 13-year-old.
I was going to bring that up as well. Like, isn't it weird that she's credited like fourth?
She's not even credited fourth. It's after fourth.
Yeah,
she's when you watch the credits at the end of the movie. Maybe it's different online on IMDb, but when you watch the credits at the end of the movie, she's like, credited like 7.
Yeah, she has Anne starring.
Yeah,
or
she's the main character of the film when you watch it.
That's what I was.
She's the driving force of the plot.
So I was actually going to ask you that today. I was going to ask, who do you think the main character is? And it's definitely
without a doubt her.
Yeah, she's the one narrating the beginning, narrating the end. She's the character that's consistent throughout the whole show, the whole movie.
And I was watching an interview too and we'll put a graphic on the screen to show what this poster looks like. I just noticed this poster in the background. The poster is like a wanted poster style film poster. It's very cool and interesting, but it says starring Josh Brolin,
it says Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, Josh Brolin, in that order.
Nowhere on that poster does it say Hailee Steinfeld, and it says directors Joel and Ethan Coen. But why is her name not on the poster? Because she's young.
She's in the back as well, and she's kind of the furthest back to the left. So it's.
Did they feel strange giving her so much credit in a movie with so much veteran actors and adults when she's young? Because she is the star of the movie.
I think it's definitely the star power. Kind of going back to the Quentin Tarantino podcast review that we did last week, where these stars are what is bringing people to the audience. Like, no one knew who she really was.
I feel like it was a disservice to her, especially at the end credits of the movie, because once you've already watched the whole movie, it doesn't matter whose name you put first. Then it should be the star of the movie, I think. And I think that it was kind of a disservice to her. And I also saw an interview with her where the interviewer was asking everybody different questions about the film, and she's 13 at the time, coming up on her 14th birthday, and his question to her is, I heard your 14th birthday is tomorrow. What are you doing for your birthday? And I was like, she's about to turn 14, but she's a heavyweight actress who is about to be nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah.
Ask her a serious question. She can handle it.
I thought that was a silly question too.
Yeah.
I thought that whole interview was a little
awkward.
Yes. Like, why are you asking these kind of questions? Like,
he had some better questions for the adult male actors, but yeah, she's a young female actress, but take her seriously. Like, they deserve to be taken seriously.
Yeah, at least put her name third, like behind
Matt Damon and Jeff Damon.
Yeah. Like Josh Brolin's in like a fourth of the movie. If that, he's
exactly
barely in the movie, I thought that was interesting. I was going to bring that up, so it was cool that you brought that up as well. I saw an interview with her. I don't know if you saw it or not, but she was talking about how she got the role and stuff, and how like the day before she went and did some readings and whatnot, her mom got her some clothes from like Goodwill and braided her hair and made her like some pants and stuff to be like time period accurate and stuff, so she can kind of get in character before she went and did her screen reading and stuff. And then she said like the next week she's just like anxiously waiting around, and then she's like, oh, they're never gonna call, and then her mom finally gets a call back. And isn't that funny? Like, her mom is getting the call
because she's 13.
She's so young. Like, her mom is answering the phone, and she's like, okay, yeah. And then she was like, Maddie Ross, someone wants to talk to you. Yeah. And that's the character of the movie. Yeah. And she like starts freaking out or something.
And she said everyone's jumping around excited. Her dad's taking pictures. Yeah, I've seen her tell that story a few times because I watched a couple interviews, and she tells it like every time. But it's a great, momentous moment in her life. Of course she should tell it over and over again. This is like a star-making role for her, which it's like huge opportunity of a lifetime, There's only so many opportunities like that when you're 13 in Hollywood. Like, most of the roles aren't written for your age or giving you the opportunity to play that. So that is such an incredible story. And she got 2 callbacks. In the final callback, she did line reading with Jeff Bridges and some of the other actors from the film, which has got to be incredibly intimidating.
Yeah,
I know if I was 13-year-old, I'd be peeing my pants. So she's
Exactly.
she's got true grit. Like she's a superstar for holding her own and all that. And they talk very highly of her. And I could go on and on with the praise I've seen for Hailee Steinfeld in this movie. Matt Damon's interview was the best, though. He says that the first big scene he shot with her, which I assume is when she wakes up in her like lodgings and he's waiting for her. He says that it was the first time he'd been with her on set, and that the Coen brothers would go up to her and give her a fairly complicated piece of direction. He's like, and I thought it was a little bit advanced, and she made the adjustment in the scene after we shot it, and then they went up to her and gave her some direction again, and she made that adjustment again. And he said he looked over at Roger Deakins, who he's been friends with for a long time, and said, has this been going on the whole time? And Deakins was like, yeah, she's a professional, like she's very talented. So he said like his thoughts of Hailee was that she was very, very talented, special young woman, and I think he's right. I mean, I think she's just going to continue to grow even from now. I mean, she's already got quite a few roles under her belt, and I'm sure she's got a lot in the bank. So she's very talented and showcases here in this film.
Definitely. Let's see.
We can wrap back to who I was most impressed with, and I want to know.
Yes, that's what it was. I was thinking there was somewhere I wanted to go.
I want to know your thoughts on this, because you said you were most impressed with Hailee as Maddie Ross. I'm most impressed with Jeff as Rooster Cogburn. I think he steals the show in every scene that he's in, even though he's hard to understand. It's in a way that keeps me like leaning in, like trying to figure out what does he mean. Okay. And like I'm locked in on him. He's super funny. He's the heart of the action as well. So he's the one that makes me laugh the most, the one with the best action, and he just has that star power on screen. Like he's Jeff Bridges. And when you watch interviews with him, I love him. I love him in real life. And I love Matt Damon too. Matt Damon says, like, when asked about working with Jeff Bridges, he says that he's so talented, like he's talented enough for both of us.
Yeah.
He said when he works with guys like Jeff Bridges or Denzel or Morgan Freeman, it's like he said Tom Hanks too, which I was, Saving Private Ryan. When you show up to work with them, they're talented enough for both of you. He said you almost don't even have to do anything because they can carry the scene. It's like being on a baseball
team with Babe Ruth.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is such a good analogy. Like he's like, I just show up, which is so humble of him because he's Matt Damon.
Right.
He's one of those guys too, and he might not think of himself that way.
He's like a A-list actor that is in a lot of like side roles in movies.
Which I love that he does that.
Yeah.
Interstellar. Oh wait, have you seen Interstellar?
I have, but it's been a long time.
Thank goodness. Okay. Spoiler alert. Sorry. But when he shows up in Interstellar, I literally jumped out of my seat. I was like, "That's Matt Damon." He's not billed on that movie prominently, so like you don't expect to see him. I'm so glad that he does that because it makes for such exciting moments in like the theater at home when you're watching a movie.
I mean, he's the only reason why I like Ragnarok even a little bit.
It's the tiniest cameo too. That's hardly even a role. Oh my goodness. Aaron hates.
Why wasn't his name on the poster?
He got shafted just as bad as Hailee Steinfeld in this movie.
The injustice to Hollywood, I swear to God.
Should have been top billed. But yeah, I think that was so interesting to hear. And Matt Damon, both of them, Matt Damon and Jeff Bridges, seem like such humble guys in real life. Like when the interviewer's asking Jeff Bridges about, is there any role that you wouldn't want them to recast? Or he's like, I don't really feel protective over he seems like the dude. Like in The Big Lebowski, a lot of people will say that his character Jeff Lebowski bleeds over into Jeff Bridges because he just seems incredibly chill and easygoing, and he just seems like a happy, grateful person. And I love to watch him talk in interviews.
Yeah, I think that same interviewer was asking, is there any role that they had to really convince you to do? He's like, yeah, all of them.
He's such an old man.
I gotta get my head wrapped around every single one,
Yeah, like he's having me dragged into every movie. I'm keep dragging him into movies, please. Right. I'm begging the industry. Like,
isn't that crazy to be so good at your job that like you don't even necessarily want to do any more movies, and people are just trying to convince you like.
Well, that's like him.
This is my movie.
That's where him and like Daniel Day-Lewis are the same, because Daniel Day-Lewis is like. They got to take him out to dinner. They got to fly him to the U.S., take him out to dinner, convince him to be in a movie. He's like, I just want to be a cobbler. They're like, please, you're the best to ever do it. Like, it's so funny that attitude towards it. Like, you'd think it'd be something that they'd be like pining after, love more than anything in the world with how talented they are at it.
Yeah. So the reason I recommended this movie to you was because it felt like a very Andrew kind of movie. Even though it's a Western, you don't watch a ton of Westerns or enjoy a ton of Westerns. but I just felt like it was very well shot. It had awesome dialogue, which I know you're a big fan of. The story was continuously moving forward, and it had great performances by great actors.
The writing is king.
Yeah. Was this movie a good recommendation? And what did you like most about it?
Absolutely. It was a movie that I needed to watch, I think. And I think it was a great recommendation. I'm very glad that I watched it. And the third part was what was the best part about it? Mm-hmm. I think that what comes through the strongest is Joel and Ethan Coen, because they directed and wrote it. So like you really feel their touch on the movie, and I've seen a bunch of their other films. So I think that that's what comes through the strongest. Roger Deakins is always great. This is not my favorite work of his. My favorite is, I'll say, Blade Runner 2049 and then Prisoners. So I don't think this is his best work in this. I mean, still Roger Deakins is still incredible. But I definitely think that the acting is superb in the movie. I love the stacked cast. Josh Brolin's great when he's on screen, but I think Joel and Ethan Coen brought too much to the table for me to say anything other than them is the most important thing to me.
Yeah, it felt very cinematic the whole time, and like they're also in scenes too that aren't necessarily what you think of when you think of cinematic, like when they're talking on the horses after they spend their first night out there, it's like in the middle of the day, it's like super bright out. Like typically it's shot more at like golden hour or dawn, dusk, where it's like the sun's not so harsh, but the sun is still harsh at those points because it's morning. Like I feel like they did that intentionally, and worked around like these bad lighting scenarios, but still made them look really good. And I'm sure a lot of thought went into it. I'm sure they have a lot of diffusion and lights and stuff on set and whatnot, but they made it look much better than the scene should have looked.
Yeah. There's a campfire scene where you can see the light wavering on them like it would with a moving light source like a campfire. Mm-hmm. And they can't be actually lighting a whole scene with a campfire. So they definitely very talented work going on behind the scenes, shooting on these planes in New Mexico and Texas like they did. Like they pulled it all together.
There's a lot of incredible like screenshots that you can pull from this movie.
Oh yeah, you can make screensaver from most of the scenes in this movie.
Like the opening scene where it starts out with heavy bokeh and kind of gets focused when it's raining, and you see Matty Ross's father laying on the ground, and then Tom Chaney runs by on his horse. That's one of my favorite shots. Really good.
It starts off so strong, and then there's a shot at the end that Josh Brolin talks about in an interview where they shoot Chaney from down low, because they'll shoot from low obviously to show position of power to make the person look big and strong and tall. So they shoot Chaney from down low, and kind of the reveal when his psychopathic nature turns on and he flip switch in his mind, he's about to kill Matty Ross, and you really feel the momentous nature of him as a monster and a villain. And another one of my favorite shots comes at the very end when they hold the long take at the very end of the film where the credits roll and they show the older Matty Ross walking away, just on and on forever. The length of time they hold that shot is where I think the strength is.
Yeah, for sure. So what was your favorite scene?
Probably the scene where, because I like the close-up nature, probably the scene where Diamond Hall Gleason gets his fingers chopped off and then he shoots. I like the grittiness, the grit of that scene, and I like the
true grit.
We're gonna say it 50 times, and I like the way that they conversate, like the dialogue of like the cat and mouse nature of like an interrogation. It felt very high stakes. What was your favorite scene?
My favorite scene. There's so many good scenes, but my favorite scene, the one that sticks out in my mind, is when they are leaving the cabin right after LaBeef got shot. He bit his tongue almost all the way off. They're on their horses. Jeff Bridges, Cogburn, is leading the way on his horse. He's very drunk. Basically didn't sleep all night is what LaBeef said to Matty Ross. And then they start bantering back and forth, and LaBeef is calling Cogburn out saying, "You're a bad shot. You shot me in the shoulder from the rifle. It was you," which makes sense because he's the only one shooting towards the direction that he was in anyways. So it was clearly him.
There were
None of the pistols were turning the other way around to shoot him.
So there were tons of bullets flying around.
And they start bickering back and forth. So he throws his glass bottle, empty whiskey up in the air, shoots it in the air, misses, lands on the ground, shoots the ground, misses, shoots it again 2 more times and misses, and then hits it. And then he's like, oh, they must have sold me bad rounds. And then LaBeef goes, he says, here, I thought you were going to say that the sun was in your eyes. That is to say, your eye.
It's the funniest scene in the movie for sure.
I love that part. And Matt Damon, especially at that time in 2010, was like one of my favorite actors, you know. So just him saying that line was hilarious.
Even a simple scene like that puts on display how they're writing. Like they take. So what I watched a Quentin Tarantino interview recently where he talks about subtext, and subtext is like writing down what your character wants out of a scene, what your character's motivation. And I feel like you feel it so strongly in a simple scene like you're talking about, because it's the pride of Cogburn, and then it's the pride of LaBeef and the Texas Ranger pride, and they're both having a pissing contest. And Maddie Ross's singular motivation is, like the tagline says, retribution. So she, even throughout the scene at one point, she's like, guys, we got to get back on task. You know, because everyone's motivation is clear, even though it's just a comedic scene.
Yeah, pull up your pants and let's go. Yeah, that scene was hilarious. They're shooting the cornbread in the air and
wasting so much food
and bullets.
Yeah,
I mean, how many bullets do they have with them? You know, they're about ready to go meet up with 4 or 5 guys that they're going to be shooting at.
Could be giving away their position.
Exactly. Yeah, but they're shooting up in the air. They both shot at the same time and
hold your fire, please.
Yeah. He's like, LaBeef's like, there, got it. And Cogburn's like, that was my bullet.
It's so simple but so funny. Like it's the brilliant screenwriting and then taking it onto off the page. But if you guys have listened this far, we really appreciate, especially this last 2 minutes where we've just been laughing at our own, like, rereading the lines of the script. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening this far. We do post new episodes every Monday and Thursday. And Arron, do you want to tell them where that?
Yeah, we post on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else you can get your podcasts. Our big ones are Spotify and YouTube. And it'd be great if you go leave us down a comment. If you've seen this movie, tell us what you thought.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And give us recommendations too. We're always asking for recommendations, but we don't get too many.
What's another Western movie that we need to see?
My Western movie education is itching for a scratch, and it needs some more to give.
Mine's pretty small as well.
So I wanted to get into talking about the awards for this movie before we summarize the plot. So this is a very interesting year for the Oscars. We already talked about it a little bit, but let's go more in depth. This movie was nominated for 10 Oscars.
Crazy.
Which is a ton of Oscars. That's a huge critical success for this movie. However, it won 0 Oscars. But this was a very competitive year for film. So the other movies that were up for Best Picture alongside True Grit included 127 Hours, Social Network, The Fighter, Inception, Black Swan, The Kids Are All Right, Toy Story 3, Winter's Bone, and ultimately it was won by The King's Speech. So that is a lot of nominations for Best Picture, and a lot of heavy competition. I mean, I'd probably give it to Inception, but I'm super biased. I just love that movie. But The Fighter's incredible. Social Network is one of my favorite movies as well. And also Toy Story 3 being actually nominated for Best Picture, which is super rare. There's only been 3 movies in history that have been nominated, or 3 animated movies in history that have been nominated for Best Picture. And the other 2 are Up and Beauty and the Beast.
Jeez.
So it's a rare honor for like a comedy or a superhero movie or an animated movie to make it.
That's like winning.
Yeah, really. You're one of 3 in history, you know? That's they stand alone for that. It's really incredible, and it's a great movie. So, I mean, do you think that True Grit should have won more Oscars with it being nominated for 10?
Who beat out Hailee for Best Supporting Actress?
So the winner was Melissa Leo for The Fighter, which is a really good, really incredible performance. And we know Melissa Leo too because we just covered Prisoners, and she's the villain in that movie. Mm-hmm. She's a great actress, but I think the thing that is difficult to compare the two is the fact that Hailee is 13 years old. Yeah. Makes it seem like she deserved to win.
I feel like out of all of them, she should have won.
Yeah, I think she should have campaigned for actress in a leading role, but I think they thought she had a better shot for supporting role, and that's normally why they make those decisions.
It's probably because they were looking at the poster and they're like, oh, we don't see her name, so she must be a supporting actress.
Yeah. Well, the actors themselves have a part, like the actor and their campaign team choose what role they're going to campaign for, and it's this weird thing where they campaign like a politician, like they have to push for it and kind of wine and dine. There's a lot of political aspect to the Oscars, so that some people kind of brush away the Oscars for that reason because of the political nature. Some other people, like my fiance, brush away because she thinks they're snobby and pretentious.
She's not wrong.
But I do think that there's a lot of weight to an Oscar. Like if you hold one in your trophy case, you're a part of a select group of people. It's like, if you're a Navy SEAL, you're part of a select honorary group of people.
Or if you're a Texas Ranger.
He has so much pride for it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Labeef in the movie True Grit, anytime he can mention that he's a Texas Ranger, he brings it up, and it's hilarious. It's kind of like those boys in ROTC that just can't stop talking about it. Or people who do CrossFit and just can't stop talking about it.
Talk about yourself.
Yeah.
Or people who think they know a lot about movies, like me. They never stop talking about it.
Or people who host a podcast.
Never stop talking about their podcast.
Yeah, I do a podcast, guys. No big deal.
Our friends and family wish we would shut up. I'm sure. So I want to go into recapping the plot of this movie, which is going to be super brief. The plot of this movie is not incredibly complicated. Just like the time period it's set in, things are more simple. And it's already based on, like we talked about, an original movie, True Grit. This is a remake of that movie, and that movie came out in 1969. So they followed the plot, from what I understand. You told me pretty closely. Is that right?
Yeah. So I haven't seen the original, but I watched the trailer for the original, which is a little cringy of how they used to make trailers back in the day, but. In that trailer, they showed a lot of the scenes in the movie that are like the key points, and they showed like the scene kind of in length rather than how they edit trailers now, where it's a lot more fast paced and stuff. And a lot of the lines and stuff from the original are in the new one. Mm-hmm. So it literally just seems like a remaster of the old one. Now, of course, I haven't seen the actual movie, but it's
not to say that they didn't put their own touch as a complete own style on it.
But from every part that was in the trailer, I recognized from the 2010 version, which was pretty cool. It definitely looks a lot different, so it was interesting to kind of compare and contrast. And John Wayne actually won an Oscar.
Yeah,
for his role as Cogburn.
I think we watched a lot of the same interviews, but one of the interviewers says that John Wayne's Oscar may have been more kind of honorary, like to acknowledge the rest of his career, the cap at the end of his career to give him an Oscar.
Yeah, he said he was surprised from it.
Yeah, and Jeff Bridges was nominated for an Oscar for his leading role in this, and he lost to Colin Firth from The King's Speech, the movie that also won Best Picture. I don't know, Jeff Bridges' performance in this is really incredible. It's my favorite thing about the movie, followed closely by Hailee Steinfeld's performance. I know that's contradictory to what I said earlier. It's my favorite performance about the movie. I said earlier that my favorite thing is still Joel and Ethan Coen making this film the way they did. Yeah. But it's, I don't know. I kind of wish Jeff Bridges would have won for this. Colin Firth is an incredible actor too.
Let's finish with kind of the recap of the plot here.
Oh yeah, I got way sidetracked.
Yeah.
So the recap of this movie's plot. This movie is a classic Western. True Grit, just like the namesake, simple and straight to the point. It starts off with the death of Mattie Ross's father and the escape of the fugitive Tom Chaney. So
she must have come from a wealthy family too.
She had to.
She's throwing out her lawyer's name left and right, like
she's
you need a good lawyer, or my lawyer will protect you, or my lawyer's going to have a conversation with you, she must have come from a well-known family. She's
wheeling and dealing for those horses and stuff too. Like she's clearly speaks in an educated manner, like that is not something everyone else in that time period could have, the benefit of education and the ability to read and write and speak so eloquently.
She has resources.
Yeah. And she portrays that so beautifully.
Sure.
Hailee Steinfeld, that intelligence and that confidence is off the charts. But so she comes to collect her father's body and to collect her father's killer's bounty and body in a way. She wants his head. When presented with the choice of 3 different officers, she picks the one that's known for,
True grit.
Yeah, for a man with true grit and a man who's known for taking lives. So that courthouse scene is one of the best scenes in the movie too. It could be up there for best scene, where we really get to know a lot about Jeff Bridges' character, Rooster Cogburn. She eventually takes him under her service. She employs him, pays him to go after her father's killer, and there's a lot of finer details that we could go into this movie that develop the characters and along their journey and develop their relationship, but the quick and dirty version is that they track until they accidentally end up happening upon Tom Chaney, and he takes Maddie Ross hostage, and with the help of LaBeef saves Maddie from Tom Chaney, and Cogburn takes out the rest of the Lucky Ned Pepper gang, the other 4 gentlemen, and gets shot in the process, and Maddie gets to shoot her father's killer and get that retribution. From the tagline for the movie is punishment always comes in some form, and the movie's a classic revenge story, classic Western, and the special nature to it is in the beauty with which and care with which it's made and designed, and everything from costuming to music to acting,
Yeah. And we watched most of the movie together, and then your computer died like the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie, so we didn't get to watch the ending together. But the ending is she gets the shot on Tom Chaney. He falls off the cliff, presumably dead. But in the process, she gets knocked down into this ditch where her leg is stuck. She's probably bruised up pretty bad. It was a pretty far fall. She's probably hurting quite a bit. There's a body next to her that has a knife on it. She tries to bring that closer. In the body is a bunch of snakes, which they've been foreshadowing snakes the entire movie by laying out the rope around them when they sleep. And they talked about how snakes aren't awake during this time and all that stuff. And then that snakes can be awakened. And at the very end, the snake was awakened by moving that body. And she ends up getting bit on the hand from the rattlesnake, and Cogburn comes down, pulls her out of the ditch, and then treks for days.
Miles and miles, yeah.
And so he's on the horse, and it was an intense moment. I don't know what you were feeling when you were watching it, but when I was watching it, I was very invested in the emotion of it.
It's like the scene at the end of Prisoners in an earlier time. He's rushing to save her life. She's been poisoned.
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
It's so guttural when he stabs little Blackie, when he stabs the horse. Yeah. And it's like, no.
Yeah, the horse has been running for miles and it's getting tired, and he stabs the horse with a knife to get it to keep running, and then eventually the horse just kind of doesn't have anything left to give, and then he ends up putting the horse out of its misery, and of course Maddie is like, no, don't do that, and Maddie's possibly about to die herself, and then he picks her up, and he's pretty old at this point, and
he starts running.
Yeah, and he didn't even care about this girl in the beginning of the movie, so it's a very big character arc and swing of his character developing a relationship for this young girl, kind of like a father-daughter love,
and I think
he really wants to save her.
That whole journey at the end should not be mistaken for Rooster Cogburn being ruthless. It's actually, in a lot of ways, him showing his softer, more kind-hearted side, because he's willing to do anything to save her. He doesn't stab little Blackie out of menace.
Right.
He knows that is a sacrifice he has to make for Maddie Ross's life, and he puts the horse out of its misery, not out of malice, but because it's at this point the kind thing to do, because it's suffering, and then he's giving every part of himself and every last breath that he has to bring her to save her life. And the ultimate sacrifice at the end is for Maddie Ross to lose her arm. There's a loss for all these characters in this film, and we're going to do a character design episode too. And one of the things about a character design is you show the character's journey through visuals. You don't have to tell us what happened to Rooster Cogburn's eye. You tell us that he lives a dangerous lifestyle by giving him an eye patch. We know that he has darkness in his backstory. We know he's been harmed and hurt. So they don't necessarily tell us what happened, but it's the same thing with Maddie at the end of the film, that, you know, loss of her arm is the a mark of the journey that she's been through.
The loss of her father.
Yeah.
Yeah, that she's suffered greatly, but persevered anyways.
I think the big theme of this movie is in the namesake of True Grit. And
True Grit.
I think at the beginning they describe Rooster Cogburn as having it, but he doesn't really have it until the end. Because he's like, he talks about his family and he's like, oh, my son never liked me much and he left with his mom. Like, I don't think he really had true grit until he was able to care about something more than himself, until he was willing to sacrifice himself. And Maddie has true grit through the course of this film because, yeah, she starts out confident and tough, but by the end of it, you know, she's avenged her father and she's given up so much and sacrificed, and she's kept up and not been a burden to a Texas Ranger and, you know, one of the toughest outlaws that's around in Cogburn. So I think that and then even LaBeef earns his stripes too.
Yeah, he had a great turn as well.
Goes from just a big talker to the hero at the end of the movie. So, and you know, the toughness and the grit and the fortitude to take that shot at the end and to save Cogburn's life.
That's no easy shot.
So yeah, so I think they all go through their journey to reach that point of toughness and to earn those stripes.
Yeah, definitely. So our podcast is called Backseat Directing, and we have a segment where we go in and give our critiques. Maybe we back some decisions up, or we give some ideas of what we would have done differently or would have liked to see differently. What kind of internet show would we be if we didn't put our own opinions into it? So Andrew, do you have any backseat directing for the movie True Grit?
Yeah, let's start with the con, and then I'll go to the pros. So what I would change about the movie, if I sat in the director's chair for True Grit, would be I would have more of a back and forth dynamic between the hero and villain. And this is another thing, like I talked about at the beginning, that they're sacrificing for realism. If you're chasing an outlaw, it's not likely in these time periods probably that you would run into each other, get away 3 times. So they run into each other twice, and the first time they don't communicate at all. It's just a gunfight back at the cabin, and then they run into each other at the end where they have the big blowout. And I think that
it's definitely a shoot first, ask question later kind of time period.
The way he shoots into that cabin and shoots.
It doesn't even know who's in there. Just, I'm gonna shoot you guys.
But I think more of a back and forth dynamic would have given us a better relationship to the villains, which even with the short screen time is a very menacing performance by Josh Brolin, and then Bill Pepper as the Lucky Ned Pepper. He just seems like really reasonable for a villain, which I find interesting in that. I mean, you know, he's done some sordid things, but he's just he's true to his word in a lot of sense. So he's an interesting character as well, but I want to see more of the dynamic.
Seemed more like the beta.
Yeah, absolutely.
Know? And the whole beginning, the whole first 2 acts, he's being built up to be this incredibly tough to capture villain who has done a bunch of wrong things, you know, like he's wanted in Texas for killing the state senator, he's wanted here for killing Matty Ross's father, you know, like he's been around the block, but then it turns out that he's kind of more of just a guy that goes where he's told and shoots when he's told, you know, like rather than actually being the head of the crew. Yeah,
they talk about that in a Josh Brolin interview where they kind of flipped the expectation was the plan, and Josh Brolin said that he thought that was a really interesting thing that attracted him to the character because he's built up so much to the first 2/3 of the film. They said, you know, he kind of thought, well, it'd be interesting, what if we, not that it was his idea, but it's an interesting concept to turn it on its head and kind of say, what if we didn't live up to that expectation? And he was just kind of a quiet, calmly talking guy who's, you know, just speaking to Maddie in a calm manner until that switch flips in his head and now he's a villain. And that was, I think, a smart choice by them, because how do you live up to what they built up, you know, in the first part of the film?
Without killing off all your main cast, you know. Yeah.
And LaBeef says at one point, he's like, oh, you'd be surprised, he's really clever. He really doesn't seem to be.
No.
So
LaBeef, it's just bad, right time, wrong place, you know, like it's just...
He's just kind of bumbling, like, and generally unlucky.
I mean, it seems like it's pretty hard to track people back then. right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's no surveillance cameras or technology. I mean, you're kind of just going off of word of mouth and a horse.
Yeah.
You know? And like, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's run into him a bunch of times, but never been close enough to arrest him or shoot him. You know. So, what is your directing critique? Like, what would you have them do differently? You want
I want more
Tom Chaney more in the beginning?
I want more interaction.
Okay.
Maybe starting earlier in the film. And it could still be that they meet him at the end of the film, but maybe more of like a villainous standoff, hostage situation, more conversation, more back and forth dynamic between our hero and villain. Because really, even though Maddie's back at that little camp with him, it's pretty immediately that he gets up to strangle her. So there's no like getting to know the dynamic between the two of them. And I think that dynamic would have added a lot more to like pulling me towards the edge of my seat. Like Cogburn versus Chaney kind of, or Cogburn versus Ned, kind of like more than the minutes that we got of it. But what was your critique?
I don't know if I really have one.
Good movie.
Yeah, I kind of like it the way it was. In, like you said, the first act, maybe even into the second act a little bit, was a little bit slow. But at the same time, I was invested the whole time. You know, I don't want to add things in just to add things in to like dilute the ending of the movie. You know,
Yeah.
like if we would have seen Tom Chaney more, like I don't necessarily have a way to make it feel as natural or as realistic as it did. I appreciate that they went with this like super ultra realistic approach to this movie, and I want to make sure that I would keep that if I did that. So I don't think I have anything necessarily to change.
Yeah.
More so to praise of what they did by keeping it so realistic.
My favorite Western is Django, and the dynamic between the hero and villain at the end is just so iconic to me. I think that's a good example of what I prefer to see. But what I would keep the same in this movie is the casting. Every casting I think was perfect. I would keep it exactly as it is, especially Hailee. I don't think anyone else could have pulled it off in the same way.
Yeah, I agree. Any closing thoughts, Andrew?
Did you have any? Well, I guess you didn't have. You already complimented the movie. I was going to say but you didn't have any negative.
My backseat directing was
keep the movie the same.
Yeah, and it was. I liked it the way it was. I don't really have any ultra critiques. You know, like maybe at some points just having the words a little more clear. But
yeah,
I had subtitles, so I made it through. You know,
I did it with no subtitles, and it was more difficult.
Yeah.
But overall, great movie. Thank you for the recommendation, and I was glad to watch it, and I'll hit you back with a recommendation soon.
All right, sounds good. Everyone, thank you for listening to this week's episode. Again, we post every Monday and Thursday. You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. And go ahead and leave us a comment. Subscribe on the YouTube channel. That helps us out a lot.
And that's a wrap.